Fantastic. Okay, we're back. We are back. The universe is going to cooperate. The universe wants us to have this conversation. This is a very important conversation, and we're going to have it. So I know that very, very soon, um, um, Ayisha will be joining us on this conversation. Yes. Okay. So once Ayisha joins us, while we're waiting for Ayisha, if anybody wants to, no, I think I'll just wait for. Okay, she's here. She's back. She's back. She's back. She's back. Right.
Right.
And we are back.
Yes, let's hope. And I just wanted to say that it might not be even you, it might be me. There's
Yes.
apparently Germany is well known for having really horrible internet. Who would have known?
Really?
Honestly,
Really?
yeah,
That's good
honestly.
to know.
It's bad for me. Not good for me.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's get right into it. Let's get right into it. Um,
Okay.
so social movements. You talked
Mm-hmm.
about watching IOB as a student in university, and
Mm-hmm.
now, have you
Mm.
seen anything a marked difference in the way that they have been built, administered, and sustained in those times, and what we are having to deal with today?
Well, I'll have to say, honestly, I'm still a student of social movements, but I'll say that
Right.
yes, the main difference, while there's very little out there that has been written about the movements around democracy, obviously, there's a lot been written from personal experience. So whether it's, Governor Kaide Fayemi's book or all other types of books that are out there, but I haven't read anything or come across anything that explains the structure of movements. So I'll say two main things that I see as different from the movements during pro-democracy and now. And even though I was teasing that what movements do we have now? I mean, the two movements I would say, like the contemporary movements I would say we have were maybe Bring Back Our Girls and then the Occupy movement in 2012. Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? Could you hear me? Or did I? Okay. Okay. So, but yes, but I think, but the key thing for me was the democracy. Yes. And so, but what's missing now from what we had before, let's say in the 90s, is that there was a common enemy, so to speak. There was a common enemy, which was the military, which was so it was sort of everybody had one goal. So at that point in time, parties didn't matter, ethnicity didn't matter, religion didn't matter. It was just let's get these people out. I think that's one fundamental difference between now and then. Now we're very splintered. I see that social cohesion is very weak. So as I said, I don't see that I don't see that we it's easy to build movements in the way that it was, and it's made me think like what would be the best way to bring a lot of Nigerians together. I don't want to even say the majority, but just a lot of Nigerians together. Would they come around based on a common enemy, as it was during the pro democracy days, or would they come around a common vision? Because it seems that our passions are more energized by fear, unfortunately, than by hope. So, in terms of thinking about, what will drive people, unfortunately, it seems like it will be fear. So, trying to find a common enemy is what would be needed right now. But I would say that honestly, I don't think that as civil society in general, and I count myself as part of civil society, I don't think we've done a good job of studying what it means to organize, because organizing is a huge factor in social building a social movement. So do we know
Yes.
how to organize? Do we teach organizing? Or do we just think that sitting in a room and saying, oh, let's protest, let's do a media tweet hashtag, that's not building a social movement. There are steps in a social movement that makes it very clear that you're in a social movement. And that's, there's the emergence of the social movement, then there's the coalescence of the social movement, then the bureaucratization, and then there's the decline. And I would say that if we use BBOG, that might be a good subject to sort of see the emergence, the coalescence, I don't think that there was a bureaucratization. I'm not sure because I wasn't part of it. I'm really hoping that the people who are instrumental or part of that movement would one day tell us how it was structured. And then the decline. So would we say they've declined? I wouldn't say they've declined yet. They're still going strong. They still remember the anniversaries. So they're somewhere, I think, in between bureaucratization and coalescence, But as I said, I don't see many movements around Nigeria. I don't think we understand the power of organizing all over the United States. And I use the United States in many of my examples because, well, for now, for better or worse, our government is sort of structured around America, and we sort of look to them for, we identify with their democracy, we follow their politics and all whatnot. So you see that they have schools that teach organizing. When I was in Harvard Kennedy School, 2009, 2010, I took a class with Marshall Gans. It was called Organizing 101.
Right.
So you learn to organize. You don't just wake up in the morning and say aluta, And I think that's missing in Nigeria.
So essentially, I'm trying to find the word for it, but yeah, people have said that outside in the West, which is where even the for want of a better word, the physiology social movements would come from. There is a systematic study of what makes it work. How do people respond to this? And people have access to that kind of thinking. I can build upon it. So if I remember I met a professor, I think in Harvard a few years ago, who was studying, and I kept talking to her about Gandhi and MLK, and I kept talking about the righteousness of their cause. And the fact that hope was a major driver. And she kept bringing me back to know these were master organizers. And I kept talking about hope, and she kept talking about organization. And at some point, I thought, should they pay attention to this woman? She's obviously saying something.
Exactly.
And funny that she was saying, look, what it appears to you is not what it is. Behind MLK's and behind Gandhi's moral purity was a capacity to build a multi-member organization, and we don't have the benefit of that. So that's essentially what you're referring to.
That's what I'm saying, exactly.
Without that system, can we build?
I think we can. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can definitely build by learning what what frames of organizing people use across the world and adapting them to us. So I would say, for example, that the ABBA women's movement, I'm sure there are lots of lessons we can learn there from how, what the issue was, an economic issue, a tax issue, how the women came together, how they organized themselves, what messages they used. There must have been some sort of structure. So what you're talking about, what organizing is a structure. And even Obama's campaign in 2008 was sort of apparently founded on an organizing structure. So it's almost like you have cells. It's almost like the way political parties organize. So you'd have to have cells who are going out, who are recruiting people. You have to have key messages. But most importantly, you have to have a goal, and you have to be driven by fundamental values, similar values, and a common vision that you want to achieve. Which, again, as I say, in Nigeria these days, black is white, white is black. It's very hard to think of a common vision. It's even hard to think of one thing that enough people are outraged about, because some people are outraged about this, other people are like, oh, it's not a big deal. We can't even agree that something is outrageous or not. So
it's not a peculiarly Nigerian thing, a peculiarly democratic thing, or a peculiarly what thing.
Yes, definitely. The world seems to be more driven now by a lot of tribal, and I use tribal in all sorts of senses, not just about language or culture, but just tribal differences where people don't want to compromise anymore. I don't know if that's because of social media. Maybe social media has found a way of driving a wedge, amplifying, hate and the intolerance. I don't want to blame only social media, because social media has done a lot of good as well. But I agree that it's not unique to us, but it's also troubling. There are many examples of women organizing, even now. If I use, and I'm using women only because that's the movement that I've sort of studied more. So, for example, apart from BBOG, which I would call a women's movement in Nigeria, we've had the movement in Ireland. I don't know if you noticed in 2008, the huge push to get abortion legalized. For me, that's an example of a social movement. There was a goal. There was, trying to get people to sign. Over 1.4 people signed the petition to say they wanted abortion legal. 1.5 million people. So that's a movement with a goal that will come to an end. So I think it's possible. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to be patient. But I think a key problem for us, if we wanted to just sort of start out the gates in Nigeria, is just the credibility of the people who would come together to drive that. We're such a distrustful society that it will really, really be difficult, but it's not impossible.
Would you agree that the people in the society have credible reasons to be distrustful? And would it be any more, any less that any society at this level of its evolution, democratically especially?
Yeah, well, okay, so the first question was, do I think
that people have a good reason to be distrustful?
Good reason to be distrustful. Yes. I would say yes. I'd say yes. We do have reasons to be distrustful, especially if we've been fed this diet for a long time. So the distrust, so in many of our cases, the distrust is not even from our personal experience. We've inherited it from our parents, who were part of, typically the people who enjoyed the best of Nigeria right after independence. Let's put it that way. So, and you might be one generation further down. So my parents, and then, you guys are coming behind. But I think that this distrust, without wanting to sort of remove responsibility from ourselves, the distrust was sort of baked into our fault lines from the British. The British pride themselves in divide and rule. And you can see their footprints in other countries that they colonized, and how those divisions continue to create problems for the population even now, especially in terms of coming together. So it was their tactic to divide and rule. So they baked into our system this distrust, north, south, east, Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, for the easy way of dividing. And we've inherited that, and we haven't really done anything. I think the Civil War also made that worse. And we've not really had any dialogue.
Okay, the war. Right,
the Civil War, and then the years of even military rule, the counter coups, this kind of suspicion under which we lived. So all those things, we've not really come together and talked about it in a way that would sort of allow for a reconciliation in the way that South Africa has attempted to do and other societies have attempted to do. And I honestly think that we're all suffering from some sort of PTSD, even those who didn't live through it. But just through the history, through what their parents tell them, through what their families tell them, we've all inherited that baggage and we're all reliving it. I mean, as you say, it's not unique to us, but it might not be unique to us, but we're so behind in a way, I feel, that we can't afford the luxury of not being together. So while America can afford to tear themselves to pieces, I mean, they have light and water. We don't even have that. So, for me, it's an unnecessary distraction in coming together to demand that we have the type of governance that we need. So, yes, we're not unique in having these divisions, but can we afford them? I think we're least able to afford them than the other societies we compare ourselves with.
So how do we, and again, this is from the position of a student, you already did a disclaimer and said you are simply a student of social movement. But how do we get to the place where we can overcome this distrust? What can we do? What if there was one thing, or if there were two things, or if there were three things? Choose your number. What would you say we needed to do?
I would say we need the 40s and below who are interested. I'm using that age deliberately, and I'm out of that age, obviously. I would say the 40s and below, so 40 to maybe 25, 20. If they could come together to have their own truth and reconciliation conversation, that's something I would definitely invest in. And the idea would be to say, let's put down on the table, on the floor, wherever it is we're sitting, all the things we think about each other, all the things we fear about each other, all the things we've heard about each other. Let us accept our role, our blame, our responsibility, our contribution. And then from that conversation, let us try and heal, let us atone, and let us try and build from there. I really do think that today, in Nigeria today, where everything is so political, so let me just use myself as an example. If I come out now, they say, but didn't you run under PDP? Then you move to APC. You're already tainted. I'm not saying that we're looking for angels right now, but I would say that as much as possible to drive this type of conversation at the very least, we need people that are sort of known to be neutral, whose views are not all out there, who have not been sort of boxed into camps, which is not to mean that which is not to mean that if people put us in a box, we can't move out of it. But I would say that
Yeah.
honestly, that would be the first start. If failing that, I would say that anybody that wanted to start a social movement, for me, the key thing would be identifying the vision and then the values within which you want to operate. The reason why the values are more important is because generally in Nigeria, we generally operate in terms of ethnicity and religion. So even when we want to put together a WhatsApp group, I'm quite sure that the admin people are sort of saying, do I have enough Yoruba people? Do I have enough Igbo people? Do I have enough Hausa people? Will some people complain? And for me, that's a distraction. What you should be looking for is, do I have people that have the values that we need here? Do I have people who are courageous? Do I have people who have integrity? Do I have people who don't have a track record? So it's, for me, that's more important than the counting of the Muslims and the Christians and the counting of the Igbos and the Hausas. But we always seem to follow this political model of organizing, and I think that's what trips us up. So you find even student associations, young parties that haven't even come out, who haven't even gotten one vote, all organizing with zonal heads. And I'm just like, you're just replicating this structural diversity that doesn't seem to work for us. How about organizing around a different model? So instead of starting from the ethnicity frame and saying, let's have 10 Yoruba, 10 Igbo, no, let's say to achieve what skills do we need here? What values do we need? And then start from there and then have your message and then start recruiting. And don't pay attention to where people come from in the beginning. Of course, the all right,
So which one?
we're back.
Right. Okay, great. That's a miracle. Okay,
Where
so
did you
yeah,
lose me? Where did you lose me?
so we're talking about, first we talked about distrust, and we said when these people come to values, the reason why values matter is
Yeah.
because X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Well, so I was just sort of saying we should organize around values instead of organizing around ethnicity and religion, which is the way we typically do. So we want, and then we
Yeah.
always seem to want familiar faces around. So I see this fear, and I see it even within civil society, where we think that we need the validation of certain faces, certain people to organize, to have a conversation. Let's not even say to organize. So if you want to put together a conference, you find that they are talking to the same people all the time. So if you have a pro-democracy conference, for example, then there are certain faces that have to be there. You know, I don't want to mention them, but I think anybody who is in that space will know what I'm talking about. Likewise, if you want to talk about
Yeah.
anti-corruption, then certain
Yes.
things. And I'm like, can we
Yes.
not? Why do we have to always have? There are 200 million people. Why are you always seeing the
Yes.
same people in the same room? Why do we think we need their validation? You know.
Yeah.
So for me, and I also think that we can redefine what a social movement is, or what we can call. And the social movement could be as simple as saying we're so dissatisfied with this government that young people, every time we see government people, we turn our backs on them. I'm just saying, that's just a symbolic way. I'm just saying,
Yes, there must
how
be
do we
something. Yes.
know?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
they know that we're not happy? How do we make demands? So for me, that's really, really important. So I really honestly don't think we have any social movements in Nigeria right now, apart from Bring Back Our Girls.
Yeah.
And it's very niche and
Yeah.
it's very controversial as well. And I don't know
Yeah.
if anything could ever be non-controversial in Nigeria, who knows?
Yeah.
But we'll only know if we keep trying.
So we have to keep trying. So why do you think we haven't, when I say tried enough, I don't mean in terms of people aren't working hard, but we don't
Right.
have enough of those trials at the same time. Why do you think?
I think it's a mix of different things. It could be a mix of our education where we haven't sort of, within our education, we haven't sort of built I think it's Enough is Enough that has Office of the Citizen, right? That's your one of Enough is Enough slogan. Yeah, so that Office of the Citizen, I don't think we've done enough with our social studies, government, history to help in the majority of citizens see their role and understand that their role is not even just to complain, or their role is not just to accept. Their role is to actually work. We keep looking to America and their democracy, but it's the people, it's the associations, it's the coming out on the streets, it's the giving. It's the giving they give to associations and causes they believe in. They come together, they lobby, so they have a very vibrant culture of engaging with government, which we don't have. Maybe it's a mix of patriarchy, maybe it's a mix of military rule, where, of course, our input was not required, and we lived under that type of system for a very long time, and it was very brutal, and we could see lots of examples of where people who engage would be slapped down. And the truth is, even though we've moved to civilian rule, I would even say we're still at the edges of practicing democracy. So I very rarely say we're in a democratic rule or dispensation. We're still in civil rule. So yeah, it's not military rule, but it's still civil rule. And it's not by accident that since 1999 we've had two former generals, Obasanjo for 8 years and now Buhari for 8 years. It's not by accident, I think. It's by design. So we're still a very top-down hierarchical culture. We're still a very deferential population who look up to, respect power a bit too much. So I think all those things mixed together to make it impossible for us to come together and say we demand anything. We sort of feel like we need to accept everything, or we need to negotiate, or we need to beg and carry bags and be patient. So I think it's a mindset. We definitely don't seem to have that culture of resistance and rebellion. And it's not as if we look at our past, which is why I brought up about women's rights, and I'm quite sure there are many other examples across different ethnic groups of people standing up to authority. I mean, people like to think that democracy is foreign, but I like to give that example of, I think is it the old Oyo Empire, where the Oba could be made to take poison. So there was a balance. The Oyo Messi. So would make him take poison if they thought that he didn't have the confidence of they and the people. So, but that's checks and balances. That's democracy. But right now we have too much power, and then I think there's also, on top of all this that we're talking about, is the fact that we're a very unequal society, and many of us are just like one paycheck away from falling into poverty. So that lack of comfort, that lack of social comfort, that lack of economic comfort, of course, will make it hard for people to be rebellious. Especially, and then again, don't forget that government, and given all the reasons why it's hard for us to come together, government is the be all and end all in Nigeria. From state government to federal government to local government, they determine everything. It's all powerful. They make all our billionaires can trace their money to government patronage in one way or the other. So when you have such a powerful government, nobody wants to cross it. Then you layer on top of that there's no justice. Justice is bought in Nigeria. So I mean, so in every way you look at it, the people have no comfort that there's anything to catch them if they fall. So the truth is, asking people to go out and for me, a movement is not only about being on the street, but asking people to rebel, so to speak, or to raise their demands in a structured way to say enough is enough, to borrow that. There are lots and lots of different factors that I guess the common person would think about first, which is why the people who normally come together and build social movements are typically the middle class. You cannot expect the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid or living on less than $2 a day, who are the majority. You cannot expect those 80 million people plus to be the ones who are fighting for justice. it's just, that's not their role. It's going to be the role of the people that can eat 3 times a day. But all the people that can eat 3 times a day are too scared. So it's almost that whole thing of clutching in one hand so tight what you have. You can't open it to grab something else that's even more than what's in your hand. So
Okay,
I think
so
those are all the challenges we have.
right. So to cut through these challenges, I guess first thing, which is first, poverty elimination or building a network of trust, which would be first? What, in your opinion, what is the first thing that we should to be able to build sustainable social movements?
It's not poverty alleviation. No, we cannot do that. That's why I said you
Exactly.
have to look
Now,
at the
I was being
middle
facetious.
class. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but I know. But you have to look at the middle class. Forget
Yeah.
trying to lift
No, I'm
enough
talking
people
about, no,
out
I'm
of
talking about
poverty.
senior poverty, the poverty where people are in the
Okay,
middle class, but
right,
their
but they're too
resources depend
scared.
on these big men. Yes,
Yes,
which
yes,
is what people accuse a lot of activists of. You know, they
of course.
say
I'm
it is
a
because of what you're going to eat. It is
sure, sure.
stomach
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure. It is because you don't eat when you are speaking. Oh my God, I've heard everything. So, so is that what it is? Is that what? So that's what I'm asking. Is that no or no? Is that
Yeah,
the first thing? No.
no, that's not the first thing I would say. Again,
Okay.
I would say that it would be, I would think I would spend more time on building trust, one, and
The number
I'll
one
build
choice.
more time in just framing what we want to achieve, finding a few like minds first. So what's the nucleus and how can they get more people to join? And so the joining will be volunteering. It's volunteering. People who volunteer, and those are the people who are comfortable, who are not too hungry, who have a bit of courage. People who you can sell the story to in a way that they see themselves in the story, that they identify with the narrative. They can see that, on an individual level, we all feel the same thing, but can we put all that into one collective bucket of hope and grievance and action? I think that would come first before trying to, because you can't sort of explain to people, don't be scared, don't be scared, don't be scared. I would say I'd like to think that there are enough people in Nigeria who are not too scared, who are a bit brave, who are saying, okay, we're ready to stick our necks out, but they need to come together. I think they're too, and it's okay for us to have multiple 20 groups who are forming. I think that's fine. To have one group. We just need to have a few successful groups that can move beyond discussions on WhatsApp groups to actually taking action, small steps of action outside social media. I think that's what we need.
Right.
And I think you'll find,
Okay.
I mean, if you're honest with yourself, you say that you're part of a few groups that could form the nucleus of a social movement. I'm sure
Of
that's
these things.
right, aren't you? Would you
Yes, I
not
am.
say
Yes,
exactly? And
yes,
I'm quite sure
yes.
that many of the people who are on participants today would also say they're in one or two groups where the people are like, okay, so how do we move the country forward? For me, those are the nucleuses. At least if you're asking that question, that means you're not too hungry and not too scared to think about what the possibilities are. So
About
we could
other
start from
things.
there.
So start from there. So that's the starting point. I'm going to take questions in
Mm-hmm.
the last 10 minutes. Let me see if there are
Okay.
any. Yeah. So is there a difference? Somebody asked, women advocate who has been with us from the beginning. Thank you for joining us from the start. Is there a difference between
Thank you.
organizing and movement building?
Organizing is actually like an aspect of social movement building. So the two are linked. You would find that in many definitions, there's very many definitions about social movement will use the word organizing. So organizing is one way of building a social movement. And what does
Right.
organizing mean? As I said, it's usually you have a structure, you have a framework, you have key messages, and you sort of say to yourself, I'm going to go and knock on doors, or I'm going to go and knock on motor parks, or I'm going to go and spend some time in XYZ place, the kind of place you want, where you think the people who should be part of the movement are. You share that story with them. You build a database. You build membership. You start giving power. So when people join, you now empower them to go and, it's almost like a Ponzi scheme to go out there and recruit more people and recruit more people and recruit more people. But the message stays the same, the goals stay the same. And then within that, you now start having your strategy. So organizing is an element of social movement building.
We seem to have had somebody asked another question, like BBOG. I'm going to link these two questions together. BBOG was spontaneous. Is that a characteristic of successful movement? Do they have to be spontaneous?
Haha, who says BBOG was spontaneous? It seems spontaneous. You see, that's the thing. The
Right.
same thing the woman said about Rosa Parks sitting on that bus. It wasn't just a day where she was tired. They had
Yes.
planned for her to
Yes.
be tired on that day.
Yeah.
Or do you understand? So the same thing.
Yes.
I know that the beginning of BBOG were not exactly spontaneous. There was lots of I remember the letter that was written.
Conversations. Yeah.
There was the letter that was written to government was written by a group of people, and that was
Yes.
before the day when people were called out to the park, to Freedom Park in Abuja. So it was not spontaneous in that sense. It's just that the message was very powerful. You know, many people could put themselves in that show, and so it caught fire in a way that made it seem spontaneous. But there were people organizing. There were calls that were being made that day to say, "I'm coming. Who is coming? Who is going to be there?" So, yeah, it wasn't exactly spontaneous.
And then somebody asked a question I like. What about
Mm-hmm.
you? Are you thinking of organizing?
I won't lie. Yeah, I am thinking about organizing, but I have a full-time job now, so that's my excuse. No, but no, but honestly, I am thinking about it, but I don't know if I need to be the face. You know, again, I'm also very mindful of the kind of culture we have in Nigeria. So even in terms of thinking about what organizing will work, you know, I'm thinking who will be the crowd drawer? You know, like we tried to do it, civil society tried to do it once or twice with people like what's his name, Two-Face, you know, and we've tried to use stars, we've tried to use star power to call people, to sort of draw people in, and it hasn't always worked to our benefit that way. But I'm still refining what the message would be, you know, if there was going to be an organized, if I was going to try to build a movement. But it's definitely
But
tempting. I definitely
is
think
it,
about it.
yeah, because, you know, there are a lot of people who think that you're running for office a few years ago was a
Oh,
civil society
really?
experiment. That it was an experiment.
Yeah,
It was a,
right.
you know what, let's go and see what is happening here as a group. Let's go and
Oh, yeah.
understand how this system works. Was that true? Is that true? Is that what it was?
In a way, at least from the women's angle, definitely. I mean, then I was CEO of Women's Trust Fund, and I know that, yeah, my board was supportive because of exactly what you said. Let's go and see what this thing is. Let's stop being theoretical. Let's see what it is practically. And the thing is, what I've learned with the women in politics, which is probably the same with men in politics. If we're trying to organize men in politics, we'll probably come with the same problem. What I've learned about women in politics is that the women who win don't tell you how they won.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
So it's good to go and know. So at least now I know how to lose. And from how to lose, you can sort of work your way back into understanding what it takes to win. So we do have an idea now of what it takes to win. But what the
Right.
question I
So,
ask now is, but now that we know what it takes to win, do we want to do those things?
right,
That's a
right,
totally
right.
different
That's
question.
really the
Yeah,
different question. Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, I have a follow-up question to that, but let me ask this one because of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so now, right now, if somebody asked you, a person who wants to build a social movement, the person who is listening to this conversation, what is
Right.
the first, what is Ayisha telling me to do now? What would that thing be?
Yeah, and you're in your emergent stage. The first thing you need to do is what do you want to achieve? So your social movement is to end child marriages. Your social movement is to ensure that all local governments get their money directly instead of through the state account. You have to, what is the vision? So I think that's the key thing. What do you want to achieve? And it cannot be vague. I want a better world. I want a better Nigeria. No, it has to be a specific goal that you know that is practical, achievable, whether it takes 10 years or 20 years. You yourself have to. I mean, are we still together?
Yes, we are.
Yes. So that would be the first thing. What do you want to achieve? Is it definite? Is it measurable? Can you define it? Can it be achieved? And then who do you need to be on board? And then you start recruiting.
Right. I'm going to ask, okay, finally, somebody says that it seems to be a number of such clearly defined movements that are
Okay.
on social media but have not had the same impact as BBOG. Why do you
Right.
think, and what would you recommend? We have 2 minutes for that question.
Oh, but that's out there. I honestly don't
I mean, there's,
know them, and I'm on social media all the time. What are these movements this person is talking about? Give
right.
me one example, Chude. if you know of any movements right
Yeah.
now apart from
Maybe
BBOJ.
not normal. Not normal. Let's say not normal,
Okay,
for instance,
not
which is a
normal.
favorite of mine.
Yes, okay. So not normal is trying to end sexual gender-based violence in Nigeria. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's it wouldn't be it would hardly be fair to say that they haven't moved outside social media.
Social
I
media,
think
right.
around 16 days of activism at the end of last year, they had
Yeah.
outings in all the states.
Activity.
They even had
Yeah.
issues with Sokoto. So I would say that look, it doesn't happen overnight, and I think that's another problem with us, that we think that we snap our finger and the social movement
And this
happens overnight.
happens.
No,
Yeah.
it will take years of dedication and focus to do it. Yeah, but
So
it's
it takes time.
possible.
So it takes
Yeah,
time.
it takes
So
time.
that means that
Yes,
Not Normal is a relatively new organization. And they
yes,
are possibly building the organization and the momentum to
they are.
become a movement that
Mm-hmm.
can actually shift things in
Yep,
Nigeria. Yeah?
exactly. I
Fantastic.
think so. I
Fantastic.
think
That's a
so.
good way to end. I think we have to do an encore of this conversation because I
I
have a lot of
know.
questions about that whole thing of, do we need to find somebody to lead this movement? That's a question I want to explore a bit more with you. So
I
I will
agree.
blackmail Enough is Enough Nigeria to do a
To have
part
part
two
two.
of this conversation.
Yes,
Thank you very
considering that
much.
we had so many issues with technology. Thank you, everyone who joined. Thank you for everybody who asked questions.
Thank you, everybody,
Enjoy
for
your
joining us.
weekend.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ayisha. Thank you.
Thank you
Enjoy
today.
where you go. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.